Okay, here we are. We are going to add and subtract fractions. So everything that we have done so far, so again, I'm using our journal notes from class. Everything that we've done so far, we've looked at unit fractions, we've looked at equivalent fractions, we've looked at simplifying in the previous videos, what's the difference between the greatest common factor and the least common multiple. These notes are all in our journal, okay? So, and if you don't have these, you can get those in our unit notes folder. However, we're going to take a look at how using all of that, how does equivalent fractions, least common multiple, and all of that, greatest common factor, how does all of that play into adding and subtracting fractions? Okay. So first off, you have been doing this for a few years now. Remember, your teachers have told you we really don't want to add the denominators because the pieces are not the same. The parts are not the same. So we have fourths and we have fifths. So we kind of can't combine them the way they are. We need to look for what does 4 and 5 have in common. And what we're actually doing there is we are looking for the least common multiple. Okay, remember that LCM in the last video? We are looking for the least common multiple. Now, the least is the best because it will get us to an equivalent fraction the quickest. So we're looking for the least common multiple. What does 4 and 5 have in common? The denominators, okay? So we're looking at the denominators. 4 and 5. Okay, skip count by 4, skip count by 5s. We did this in the last video. The LCM of 4 and 5 is 20. Okay, so we just did our first step. We know that the least common multiple between 4 and 5 is 20. So we want to create fractions that are out of 20. Okay, so that's our goal, is to create fractions that are out of 20. That would be equivalent fractions. Make equivalent fractions. Okay. Next step. Now, we're making equivalent fractions using the LCM as our denominator. Okay, so the denominator has to be 20. Now, how do I make an equivalent fraction? Remember in the last lesson, anytime you multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number, you get an equivalent fraction. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. 5 what's make 20? 5 times 4. But remember the rule, when you want to make them equivalent, you have to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same. Okay, remember that's fraction is 1. 1, it's the number 1, and we're going to multiply 3 times 4. So we have just created an equivalent fraction. I'm going to use green, stick with a new color. Okay, 3/5 is the same thing as 12 over 20. Same thing, they're equivalent. Now I'm going to do the same thing to my fraction up top here, 2/4. Now if you've realized that 2/4 is a half, okay, some of you might have realized that 2/4 is equivalent to a half. So I already kind of know that my numerator is going to be 10 because 10 over 20 is a half. But if you want to do the math, just to double check, 4 times 5 is 20. Remember, numerator and the denominator have to be multiplied by the same number because that is one whole, one same as 1, and 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, so now we have equivalent fractions. We're good. So now we just have to, next step is add, okay? Add the numerators. Remember, we're not adding the denominators. Add the numerators, okay? 10 plus 12, 10 plus 12 is 22. So my answer is 22 over 20. Now, perfectly fine. That is an answer, 100% correct. However, what we had learned in the last class is it's not in its simplest terms. So we need to, last step, simplify if needed. Okay, if needed, because you're not always going to need to simplify. Simplify if needed. So we have what's called an improper fraction. We're going to have a whole video on improper fractions. You can watch that one before this one. So improper fraction, so that means we want to make sure it's in simplest terms. And technically an improper fraction, it's not really that it's wrong, it's just a fraction greater than 1, okay? So it's just a fraction that's just greater than 1. We don't walk around saying, I have 12 tenths of a pizza. You usually say, I have 1 and 2 tenths of a pizza, or 1 whole pizza and a couple slices left over. So a mixed number is what we need to make. We're going to make a combination of a whole number and a fraction. How many 20s will make a 22? Well, 1. I can make one group of 20. All right, 1 times 20, that's 20. But I have 2 left over. With 2 left over, what you're doing is just dividing. 2 out of 20. My denominators stay the same, okay? My denominators stay the same. We're just taking a look at how many groups of 20 can I make with that 22. I can make one group of 20 with 2 left over. 1 and 2 tenths. Now, if you notice, 1 and 2 tenths is still an okay fraction, but we can simplify 1 and 2 tenths. 1 and 2 twentieths. Sorry about that, guys. 1 and 2 twentieths. 2 and 20. What do they have in common? Oh, look, that's the GCF. What's the greatest factor that 2 and 20 have in common? Ooh, I'm having a hard time this morning. 2. They share the factor 2. So if we divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2, we've just simplified 2 over 2, the fraction, 1 tenth, okay? So technically, the answer is 1 and 1 tenth. Now, we talked about this in class, 22 over 20, we could have said 11 over 10. So some kids recognize, oh, wait, I can cut 22 in half and I can cut 20 in half. 11 over 10. That is a correct answer. This is a correct answer. This is a correct answer. And this is a correct answer. They're all equivalent, but we want the one that is simplified, okay? So that is where adding and subtracting fractions can get a little tricky, is in the answer. So right now, as we're in the learning stage, I'm going to accept these answers, but I will encourage you to simplify, because as you get into upper level maths, you are going to need to simplify, okay? All right, we're going to do one more real quick. We're going to do a mixed number. Same concept. 25 and 2/3 plus 7 and 1/8. All right, first step, find the least common multiple of the denominators. So 8 and 3. What is the least common multiple between 8 and 3? In this case, it would be 24. If you skip count by 3s, you skip count by 8s. 24, or 3 times 8 is 24. So that strategy that we talked about in the last class would work. Okay, so I'm going to create equivalent fractions that are out of the least common multiple, which is 24. Now I just figure out how to make 8 24 times 3. 3 times 3, 8 is 24. I have to do the same thing, numerator and denominator, and that would give me the fraction 3 24ths. 3 24ths is equivalent to 1/8. Do the same thing up top here. 3 times 8 is 24. I have to do the same thing to the numerator and the denominator, and that would equal 16 24ths. All right, so we're almost finished. Last step is now add the numerators. 16 plus 3, that would be 19 over 24. 25 plus 7, that would be 32. Last step, simplify if needed. Well, I'm looking at this fraction. This is a prime number. This is a prime number, and a prime number also, it's odd. This is even. So we don't really have any common factors. There is not a factor that you can count by and land on 19 and 24, except for 1. And 1, if I divide this by 1, I'm still going to have 19 over 24. So I'm done. In this case, we didn't need to simplify. Okay? Now, in your resources, again, if you go into your virtual classroom, click on that Math Tools, open up the virtual page. Down at the bottom, there's a list that says additional resources. There is this which is fraction subtraction and fraction addition. So this tool, I showed this to you in class, but guys, look, this is a great way to check your work. So I am going to model for you how you can use this website to check 2/4 and 3/5. So I added 2/4 plus 3/5. Remember all that work we had to do to get it into its simplest terms? This system or this website will put it in simplest terms for you already. So if you're having a little bit of trouble with this and you get an answer like 22 over 20, it's not going to come up here as 22 over 20. It's going to come up here as 1 1/10, but that's okay. You can still use that to help you and make sure you're simplifying correctly. All right, so 2/4, I'm going to change this fraction. See, it comes up as 2/3, but I'm just going to come in here and hit reset. Hold on. My website is like super slow. Let me refresh my screen. Okay, so again, if it's running a little slow, just refresh. That always helps. Okay, now, good. 2/4. I just have to change my denominator. And then 3/5. 3 and 5. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click add. All right. It makes a model for you, which is fantastic. You can use that to help you with, okay, I need to make smaller parts. They're not the same denominator. So if you are having a hard time with listing your multiples, this computer will help you and list them for you. So list the common multiples of 4 and 5. So I can just kind of advance through and like, okay, that's close, but not quite. There it is. There's my common factor, 20 and 20. Check, and it rewrites the problem for you, kind of just like what we did here. Rewrote the problem, and notice my pieces. And notice I'm going to have more than a whole. Do you see that? It's already showing me that I'm going to have more than a whole because that's where the fraction break is and the next little piece. Okay, so now I can check my answer, 1 1/10. But if you physically count it, you can actually count here that there's 10 plus 12, which is 22 20ths. So you can see your original answer down here in the model. You can also see 1 and 2 20ths. So here's 1 whole and 2 20ths, or in simplest form, 1 1/10. This website is absolutely amazing. You can't use it for mixed numbers, but you could definitely use it for the fraction. So I could just come over here and change this to 2/3 and 1/8. Do the exact same thing, just add my whole numbers later. Now it's going to do the same thing. It's just going to add and show us the denominators are not the same. So I'm going to create a common multiple. I'm skip counting. I'm just going to do a few here. Look, there. As soon as you have a match, the box will appear. They've rewritten the fraction for you so you can check, and voila, 19 over 24. And then you can just add the whole numbers.